I remember I had talked to a buddy of mine who was wanting to flip houses. He went out and bought a house, no money down. This is like before the loan crisis, whatever. Right. He buys a house, no money down. Because he's like, well, you just buy it lower than it's worth, and then you sell it. So he chooses to buy a house in North Tulsa, which, just so you know, North Tulsa has perpetually low real estate prices. It's a community that's struggled, and it's not necessarily a great spot to buy property. So he bought like the nicest house in a terrible neighborhood, but it was half off. Well, then he buys it, and he didn't factor in that someone would break in all the time. He didn't factor in that the closing costs would be outrageous. He didn't factor in that the contractor he would pay a contractor to do the work, and then he would disappear and never come back and never do the work. So he had to pay, and all of a sudden he emerges from that with a new understanding of what it means to invest in real estate. But ultimately, I mean, we learn best by doing.
We learn best by doing it. I'm glad that the first rental property I ever bought, I took a step, and it was a big deal at the time, and I really am glad I did it. I didn't make much money. I made a little bit of money, and it was a lot of work. And I know how to do it, but if I hadn't taken that first step and actually doing it, then I would have never done the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And so I'm glad that I did it, but having ideas that you're going to get rich quick by doing those things is a terrible way of thinking. But getting rich in education is something that you can get.
Well, I want to put this down here. This is huge. Any entrepreneur I've ever met, what we do is we define, then we act, then we measure, and then we go in there and I can't write. Okay. Oh man, okay. So the deal is that we basically define what we want to do, then we act. So like I want to invest in real estate, but then we actually have to do it, and then we have to measure, like, am I making any money here? And usually right here, this is where you go, oh, because this is fun. This is fun to say, I want to start a business. And then we do it, and then we're like, oh no, I'm not making any money. And then we have to refine and come on back. And I think most people love doing this. We love talking about, I'm going to start a business. Someday I'm going to start a videography company. Someday I'm going to start a landscaping business. Someday I'm going to do, someday I'm going to do it. You got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Someday is not actually a day on the calendar, but we say someday I'm going to do it. Then we act. And then we act, we measure it. And then when we measure it, we go, that didn't work. And a lot of people get out of the game right there.
Yeah.
But you have to refine it and do it again. So now we get into this here. So sometimes it's tough to start doing something when you're paralyzed by fear.
Yeah.
And we find ourselves working, kind of waiting for that perfect time to make the moves. In fact, Napoleon Hill, who's my favorite self-help author, the famous author once famously wrote, "The time will never be just right. We must act now." In your mind, what's he talking about?
Well, I'm a very analytical person. I like to do a lot of measuring in the define stage, and you got to be careful on doing too much measuring, because then you'll never act and never do anything. It's important to measure and define and spend the time get as much information as you can as quickly as possible, but you can talk yourself out of any good opportunity. It's important not to just jump in. I mean, I don't jump in. That's not my nature. But it's important that you actually get to the act phase of something.
I had one of the mentors in my life. He said, "Get the facts, and then act."
Yep.
And to me, that's always been my move. I'm like, I can make a decision very quickly if I have all the facts. So some people meet me and they'll say, "Man, you made a decision on that really quickly." Well, I had all the facts. Some people will say, they say, "Man, you took forever." So, for example, on Thrive, the set, Dan Robb, our beautiful man doing some filming today, as he's filming, he wants to make the best quality video for you as the viewer. And so Dan Robb will say, "Hey, we need to buy this mic." Well, I don't know what this mic costs. I think it was like, was it $2,800 for this mic? It's a beautiful microphone, just beautiful. I think it's like $2,800 for this microphone. Yeah. So I'm like, well, talk to me about how much this microphone, tell me why we need this mic. Tell me, sell it to me. And then once I know the facts and I talk to a guy, Mr. Mitchell, and he says, well, that's the mic you need. And then I talk to another guy and he says, that's the mic they use on TV programs everywhere. Then I can make the decision.